My husband and I decided to hike the Dunes Park, so we hiked out to the beach and just on a whim decided to take a different path back. We actually saw stone stairs going up, and we couldn't quite see what was at the top of the stairs. And we ended up in front of this dilapidated house. The mansion was boarded up. The doors were smashed in. It was really just a mess. Garbage was all around the mansion. Of course, my husband thought, oh, what a dump. He looked at me and he could tell that my reaction was completely different. I was enthralled with the place. For me, it was like the clouds parted and this angel sang. I thought it was the most beautiful place in the world, even though at that time it was boarded up and very different from what it looks today. That was my first sighting of the Felt Mansion. My thought wasn't someone should do something. My thought was, I need to restore this. This is something I need to do, I want to do, and I'm going to do. It was almost asking me to help it change. And I said yes. My name is Patty Meyer, and I took on a restoration project when I was young and foolish. And somewhere along the way, I learned a lot. Are you guys ready for me? So my name is Patty Meyer. I have been doing this 22 years, and it's just like a blank. So I want to tell you the whole history of the house, and then we'll go through and look at the house. So once upon a time, there was a man named Dorr E. And even from when he was a little guy, he was a genius. He was an inventor. He always wanted to make things better, make a machine that could do it easier, do it faster. You know how railroad cars are hitched together like this? He came up with the safety mechanism so that if they came apart, there was a plan B that kept it together. By the end of his life, he had 75 different patents. Dorr Felt was a 24-year-old man, and he had it in his head that he could create a mechanical calculator. So the comptometer is completely mechanical. And the first one he created, he just had to use whatever he had. Apparently, macaroni used to come in a wooden box, because that's what this is. This is a wooden macaroni box. And he used meat skewers, and he used tractor parts and rubber bands. He used anything that he had on hand, and he made it work. What was eventually called the macaroni box comptometer, it's now in the Smithsonian. And you'll notice that we have a wonderful collection of comptometers. It's actually the largest collection of comptometers in North America. The comptometer, which was the first adding machine that could do all 4 math functions quickly and accurately, it revolutionized how business did business. And so they thought to themselves, the men in the office, this is just going to be another machine for my secretary to use. I don't need to learn how to use this. The comptometer looked like a typewriter. It was covered with keys. 99% of the graduates from comptometer school were women. And what happened when they knew how to add up those columns faster than their male counterparts? They got the jobs. So it broke that first glass ceiling. So it was really an amazing invention. If you look up a timeline of computing, you will find Dorr Felt on that timeline. 20 years after the invention, he was a self-made millionaire. And so that's partly what makes his home important, is just the contributions that he made to society. Someone walked up to me the other day and said, wow, it must be really great to work in a mansion, so beautiful. And I said to them, well, you know, it is great to come here and work here every day, but it didn't always look like this. It's had a hard journey. It's had an interesting journey. If these walls could talk, what would the house say? I think one of the things that the house would say is that you can start anew. It's had to start anew over and over. It was, of course, a summer home for an inventor. It was a school for 200 young men. It was a high school for young men. And then this became a home for a group of cloistered nuns. This was the biggest time of alteration. Then it was part of a prison system, so it was a state police post. And then there was a time when just really bad decisions were made about the house. The house was headed for the wrecking ball. And I think if the house could say something, it's don't give up. Because something might come along, something you never thought would happen, might happen in your life and really turn things around. For that house, that happened to be when I came along and suddenly found this house and turned things around. But in your own life, you don't know what's coming around the corner. You can't just walk up and go walk in an abandoned house and start restoration. There's a process that you need to go through. So I went to the township and I told them my ideas, and I have to say that I was almost laughed out of the room. To have someone say, eventually we're going to have weddings there, and we're going to have parties there, and we're going to have art exhibits, that seemed laughable at the time because of the condition that it was in. Thankfully, they saw something in me and said, well, you might as well give it a try. So I was given a huge budget of $0, and I was told to go for it, and I did. I started the project. I knew there'd be a lot of work. I mean, I knew we were going to be scraping and painting and sanding and, rebuilding woodwork. When we walked through first, you had to create paths. You had to slog through garbage. And we filled one dumpster probably 4 or 5 times with just garbage. And another one we filled with dead animals. I wasn't quite prepared for dead animals. And there were a lot of dead animals in the Felt Mansion. All the drop ceilings were covered with animal debris and nests. I mean, we even had a deer that had died in the basement because the basement had been left open and the deer got in and somehow got trapped and couldn't get back out. Like you do if you're a birder, you make a life list. We made a life list of all of the dead animals that we found and some live animals that we found. And when you look back, you laugh, and it's part of the enrichment of the whole story. It becomes everything that happens in the story. Oh man, when I discovered this room, I thought it was going to be the worst room to restore in the entire mansion. It was such a mess, and I dreaded restoring this room. I actually didn't want to do this room. It looked as if it was painted battleship gray, and I thought, oh no, what if originally it was stained and I'm going to have to strip all of this wood to get it back to its beautiful state? It's just going to take forever. And about the 3rd time I was out here, I came and I looked a little bit more closely at the woodwork, and I just wiped the wall a little bit. And I realized that that wasn't battleship gray paint. It was just dirt and mold and mildew and grime that had just built up over the years. And so my sister and I came in and we had Murphy's oil soap and linseed oil. And in one day, we cleaned the entire room, and it turned out to be the beautiful room that you see today. And that doesn't happen very often in restoration. More often in restoration, you think something's, oh, this is just going to take a week of my time. And you start in and you realize there's one obstacle and there's another obstacle. And what you thought was going to take a week starts to take 2 months. So every so often you get a happy surprise, and this room was a happy surprise. It didn't take long, and it really ignited my passion. And it's those kinds of things that are very rewarding in restoration. So here we are in the parlor. This room was an absolute disaster area. This was the worst of any of the rooms in the house. When the nuns lived here, this was chopped up into about 8 different little cubicles. And that was so that they each could have their own little area, their prayer area. But to facilitate that lifestyle, they changed the mansion immensely. So anything in the mansion that looked superfluous, looked fancy, they had removed. This is such a beautiful mantle. It's made out of Honduras mahogany. The details on it are exquisite. And every time I come here, I'm amazed because it wasn't here when we started the project, and yet it's original to the mansion. So that begs the question, how did that happen? So we banged through the walls, and sure enough, there's the original firebox. I said, I want to check and see if the flue is still working. Oh, no. Oh, no. You're ahead of me on this one. Everything that's up in this chimney comes falling down. I'm covered with bird and bat skeletons and raccoon poo, everything. At that moment, Dorr Phelps' grandchildren walk in from Chicago. You know, I'm just trying to say, oh yes, we have so much community support, and I try to go right into director mode, and there's just, the room is, you know, got dust flowing through it because we've just pounded, the carpet's halfway, the floor is still tacky, you know, I mean, it was a true mess. The good news is, right behind them walked in a man, and just as nonchalantly as can be, he said, if you ever want that mantle, it's in my barn and it's been there 35 years.
Oh, wow.
You have never seen two people hop into a pickup as fast as my husband. I think we beat him home. Not only did he have this gorgeous mantle, but he had all of the pieces of wainscoting, he had the crown molding, he had many of the light fixtures. He worked for the company that was doing the alterations when the nuns moved in, and he took it and he brought it to his barn. He never touched it, he never moved it. And 35 years later, we came along and went there and picked it up and brought it back. And the best thing about it was that when we brought it back, it fit right in. Of course, it was made for this spot, so of course it's gonna fit here. And so did all of the other pieces of paneling. They fit right in the spot where they belong. And that's part of restoration. It was gone for 35 years, and then we brought it back. That's something that just happens when you're in the act of restoring. But if we weren't in the act of restoring, he wouldn't have had the opportunity to walk in and give those things back. So even though you don't know what's gonna happen, you still have to just go ahead with the plan. You have to be restoring for those great things to happen. That's probably the most delightful day I had at the Phelps Mansion. He decided he wanted the house to be environmentally self-sustaining. And so he implemented all kinds of green technologies. And this is the 1920s. He put electricity in the house at a time when most houses had gas. He wanted to be able to air condition the home, but of course air conditioning hadn't been invented yet. You open a hatch at the bottom of the house, and you open a hatch at the top of the house, and those are the only things you have open. You know, it's naturally cooler in your basement. So all of that 60-degree air comes swooping up through the house, and it still works today. You can stand on the steps here and my hair will blow back. It's just amazing. I mean, he had all kinds of stuff like that. I even think our solar array is historically accurate. He had so many green technologies. He created an undulation machine in Lake Michigan. And that undulation machine used the power of the waves to power a pump. And the pump pumped that ice-cold water out of Lake Michigan up to the windmills, and there were 9 windmills on this ridge, and those windmills created energy for the estate at the same time. And he brought that water inland, and he amended the soil and irrigated the soil, and he turned what was basically a worthless piece of land from a farming point of view, and it became a productive farm. But along the way, he made a bunch of mistakes. Well, he had a couple of windmills that went like a carousel. And one of those windmills that he made that went like a carousel was so loud that the neighbors complained. The closest neighbors were 5 miles away. And so he eventually had to take that down. He had to dismantle that idea. But the lesson in that for me is that even the most brilliant person makes mistakes. We're taught so often that if you make a mistake, that's failure. You're done. You have failed. You made a mistake. You did it wrong. And instead, an inventor looks at it like, well, that's one way not to do it. If a mistake is the end of the road, we're done. We need to be able to see and know on an inside level, know that that mistake is part of what's gonna make it more beautiful later. Because I've been through this, both personally and professionally here at the mansion. I've been through it where, man, we made a mistake, and then later we found out that was all part of the process we needed to go through to get where we are right now. The foyer had been so destroyed because the roof caved in on the end of the foyer. And so there was probably a 20 by 30 patch that just, I mean, it wasn't even there anymore. It was not salvageable. And so I would go on those tours and I would tell my wish list, because I always believe that if you put your wishes out into the universe, that you will get an answer back. I want to have a floor that's made the way Dorr Felt made it. It's the material that he used. That's what I want. So I want to reconstruct that floor. So I'm giving a tour, and a man says to me, I don't know if this is any help. I have these raw logs, and they're huge. I can't pick them up with my pickup truck. They're logs. They're from trees, and they're raw, and they're huge. I said, I'll take them. I had no idea what I was going to do with them. None, clueless what I was going to do with them. So on the subsequent tours, I said to people, we're trying to rebuild this floor, and I've got the logs, but I don't know how to move them. So if any of you has a clue how I can move these logs. The next night, a guy comes up to me and he goes, my brother-in-law owns a mill. He has to move logs all the time. Where do you want those logs moved? And I said, well, to a mill. To a mill would be lovely. Now I needed the walnut splines and the little square pegs that are in there that are so unique. I mean, it's so unique. And if you look at that floor, you'd never know. You would never know that this is original and that's not. And so the wonderful workers at Evergreen Commons, which is a senior center in Holland, they made the splines and they made the pegs. And the only investment we had in that floor was about $100 in finishing materials to put on top of it. And the first estimate that I had for that floor was $80,000. We so often don't think about wood. That's how restoration's done. And as I'm talking about the restoration of the estate and all of the different obstacles that we had to overcome, you can feel a change actually in the group, a lightness that comes in when people recognize that change is possible. I really love the pond. I'll go out to the pond. If I'm having a very bad day, it's a really peaceful, beautiful place. We didn't even know it was here. It was so covered by weeds, and it had gotten so filled in with dirt that the weeds from the yard blended right into the weeds that were in there, and so all of that had filled up with muck over the years. At the very beginning in the project, the crew was me and my husband. I had to get in there, my husband and I, with shovels, just shoveling out, and wheelbarrows and shoveling that out. Now it's gorgeous, and I think it's a neat accomplishment to look back on that. That something so bad could be so beautiful. And it was hard work. The pond was filled with muck, and when we got it done, I thought, we're done. And then I found out, no, we're not really done. Restoration also requires maintenance. And so the pond got mucky, and the pond had stuff floating on the top, and I had to change the filter and add algicide. I have to come out here in these glamorous waders and change the filter and clean out all of the debris. And that's just, it's part of restoration. Part of restoration is hard work, and it isn't always glamorous work, but it's always worthwhile. Well, I think, you know, you can go along in a relationship with someone, let's say it's your best friend, and you just haven't called for a while. If you want a relationship to stay good, you have to be there. You have to be cleaning out the filters, and you got to be willing to put those waders on. We're not all willing to do that and just show up in someone's life, and it takes that. Sometimes it's dirty. It's hard work. It's not always fun. And there it goes. We had a paint specialist come in, and that paint specialist sanded down to the original layer, and he could tell whether it had been stained first or painted first. So everything that he said was stained is stained now. Everything that he said was painted is painted the original color. So the only difference is this isn't lead paint, obviously. We're doing this to show people what it looked like in the 1920s. So we think of paint as a cheap fix. Paint was not a cheap fix back then, especially if you had it tinted. So, you know, upstairs you'll see these bedrooms and they are crazy wild colors. And one of the colors is really, like, it's not one I would choose. But yet it works in the room. But I chose it because it was the original color. I mean, I can remember when the paint specialist said, like, this is the original color. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, okay, I guess we'll do that. And it all turned out, and it's all beautiful now, but sometimes you have to take that leap of faith. I wanted it so that if Dorr came in, he would not be surprised by what he saw, that it would look very much the way that it did the last time he was here. I want to tell you, if I had to choose a bedroom in the world to have as my bedroom, shoo, this is pretty nice digs, isn't it? So this is Agnes's room. You've got this very spacious bedroom. It's got an adjoining sunroom, and it's got an ensuite. If you walk in the restrooms later, you'll see they have built-in tubs. Now, we don't think anything of that, but before that, it was all clawfoot tubs. I mean, this was really something. So many people said, it can never be done. There's no way. There's not even enough money in the world to turn that thing around. It was such a mess. But incrementally, we did it room by room, and we just decided to focus on this area, fix this up. And now it's beautiful. I think when people see a home that's been incredibly neglected, you'll have the person that looks at that home and goes, phew, that's not even worth restoring. That's beyond help. And I also think people think that about maybe themselves or about other people. They'll look at a life and they go, oh, they're so in shambles. They're just not worth it. And my experience has been the opposite. It's so worth it. It's so worth restoration. My own life had gone off the rails and was in a shambles. And I just decided that I was worth making better decisions for. And I started to make those decisions, and my life got better, and my life got more beautiful. And it still needs work, and it still needs maintenance, but it's beautiful, and it's always worth it to do it. I absolutely love this house. I've loved everything about this house from when I started restoring it. I can tell you about every inch of the bleached mahogany inlay. There was a drop ceiling in this room, and when we first started the project, we had no idea the crown molding was up there. How much would it cost today to have that kind of carving in our house? And I'm like, what's the deal? And then I noticed that there's plywood on this side and there's plywood on this side. And we took the plywood off and they were French doors. We took down those partition walls and there was 8 inches of absolutely pristine original wallpaper. All of the wallpaper is absolutely patterned after the original. When I started the project, so many things were ruined. Oh, there was just disasters in every room. There was not one balustrade missing from the banister. It was unbelievable. It was like, no matter what happens around me, I'm just gonna be here solid. This remained. This was always beautiful. It was beautiful then, and it's beautiful now. Dorr Felt planted 250,000 trees. All of the trees that you see around the Felt Mansion, they were not here in the 1920s. What was happening is this was one huge dune. They lived down in a small farmhouse first, and they would have to dig out that farmhouse because the wind from the winter would blow all the sand in and bury the house. So he planted trees in order to stabilize the dunes. All of the trails through the Saugatuck Dune State Park, which is adjacent, are really Dorr Felt's original paths that he created throughout his estate. But one of the trees that he planted close to the mansion here, and it's still here today. This tree has been here from the beginning. I remember looking at pictures where I saw this tree as a sapling staked here in the ground. It was so young. And now it's huge and it's beautiful, but it's imperfect. Right here is where it got hit by lightning. You can see the char marks. It lost a huge limb. It's really showing signs of age. It doesn't have that perfect round shape we all want in a tree. It's got a big section where it's missing. It's a restoration project. Every year we work on this tree. We cable this tree to keep it together. And then it rewards us. It always looks beautiful. It's wonderful to sit under and to picnic under. To me, it's just a symbol that things can still be useful without being perfect. There can be greatness even in imperfection. And so I've never been able to have the heart to cut down that tree. I always keep it just as a reminder of that it's okay. It's okay not to be perfect. So we're gonna head upstairs. Well, the hallway at the mansion on the second floor, it can actually be really intimidating. If you're here at night, it looks like something out of The Shining. You know, you've got this long hall, it's got all these doorways. And I can remember when I started the project being overwhelmed. What door do I go through? Where do I begin? You can get stuck just standing in the hall and be intimidated by how many doorways there are and how many choices there are, because there's an overwhelming amount of work to do in restoration. And I realized you just have to pick one. You have to pick one, and you have to go through it, and you have to do what needs to be done there, and then go on to the next door. There's gonna be another door. But if you just go through a door, do what needs to be done through that door, it gets done, and then you have a little more confidence to go through the next one, because you can look back and go, yeah, I did a good job on that room. Now let's tackle the next one. So this doorknob's not working. And one of the problems with doorknobs I have found is if they're overused, if they're used too much, they get loose. We call Mondays doorknob day because the doorknobs are getting a lot more use than their intended use when it was a summer home. Dorr Felt did not intend for doorknobs to be used by hundreds of people every weekend. And that's what happens here at the Felt Mansion. So every so often I have to go around and I have to tighten all the set screws so that the doorknobs work again. It's not something I intended to do with my life. Wasn't what I thought my career would be about, but it's a necessary thing. You're not one and done. You don't restore something and then walk away. It's just the ongoing maintenance of restoration. And there, it's working. This is the formal dining room. Now, when the whole Felt family was here, they would use this large room because they had more people. If they just came up and it was just a few of them, this isn't very intimate if you're only up here with 3 or 4 people. So then they would use the breakfast room. So you're welcome to wander through them later. So a couple of cool things in here. Underneath the table, Dorr Felt had an outlet where he installed a button And that button was for Agnes Felt. She could press it with her foot and the maids would come. This is an original felt rug. And one of the grandchildren just gave it back a couple of years ago. Every one of our wall sconces is original, and they are amazing. I love the light that they give off. The mural on the wall. Now, it wasn't here when we started. All of these walls were pure white, and I didn't have any idea what they were supposed to be. All that was on the wall, and it was crazy, were these scraps of, and it looked like the kind of canvas like an artist uses, that kind of canvas, different from wallpaper. I couldn't understand what it was. So I kept them, and I took them down, I put them in a notebook, and I kind of really honestly forgot about them. And then the Felt family came one day, and they had this wonderful picture of the room, and the picture was taken with a fisheye lens, so it took in the whole room. And then I could see, oh my gosh, that room had a mural. I'm an independent spirit, and so to ask for help is extremely difficult for me. But there was no way that I was going to be able to paint this mural. I can't paint like this. And there was so many lessons to be learned along the way. You know, how to make partnerships, how to keep partnerships. I learned that in preservation, you have to ask for help. There was an area artist, Kathy Kingsley. She's quite well known in the area. And she came out here and she donated a summer of her time and painted our mural. And so I had to let my ego go a little bit, and I had to ask for help. Those scraps I thought were worthless, right? They turned out to be integral because she knew what color to use. We even had to paint the ceiling blue, which is really surprising in a historic home. Not only was it necessary to ask for help, it was so beneficial. It brought all kinds of people in, and we ended up with a much better restoration project because we did it together. This won't sound innovative today because more and more historic homes are going in this direction. But 20 years ago, when I began restoring this historic home, every historic home everywhere had red velvet ropes, and things were behind plexiglass. And you walked through in a single file and you saw these sterile tableaus, and that was a historic home tour. And that's why many people were bored with historic home tours. If we want people to love history and to love historic places, we need them to engage with that place. The township made it clear, and rightly so, that they were not going to put money into this. So it had to be financially sustainable. We needed people in here for very practical reasons. We needed people in here, but people also needed to be in here. If you want people to be part of restoration, you have to welcome them in. You can't cordon them off. So we had to come up with an adaptive use. And our adaptive use is as an event center. We're a community center, we're an event center. And it was really sort of based on Dorr Felt himself. Mr. Felt really believed in bringing people here to have fun and to enjoy it. And that's the vision that I had for this house. But if you come here and you have an experience here and you eat a meal at the table, or if you book a wedding here, or if you have your guests stay here, or you paint a picture, or you're up in the ballroom for a dance, that's a very different experience at a historic home. But it involves compromise. I've had to take the attic here and turn it into a men's and women's restroom. Why? Because I've got 150 people here. Purists in restoration don't always want to make those compromises. So they stick to their guns and they stick to red velvet ropes. And guess what? We're losing 2,000 to 5,000 historic homes a year because they won't compromise. I think I'd rather compromise. You know, I think I'd rather sacrifice here and there, have the adaptive use, and then have it still a living, breathing, dynamic place. Eventually, he bought 5 different adjacent farms and totaling about 1,000 acres. He had 2.5 miles of lakefront. They first lived down in a farmhouse down the hill, but they soon outgrew that. Their daughters were getting married. In fact, this picture here is of one of the receptions for their daughter. Their daughter got married at Gibson Church, and he remodeled their entire church for his daughter's wedding, inside and out. We now have that church on our site. So that is Gibson Church. It used to be 2.5 miles from here. The church was going to tear it down, and I begged them because I love to save things that are beyond repair. Now remember, I have 0 money. They gave me 6 months, or they said they were going to tear it down. And a man came up during a tour, and he said to me after the tour, if you're going to move a building, you're going to need some kind of foundation. So he came up, he said, I'll dig the basement, I'll build the foundation, and I'll put the front steps on the building. So go ahead and find a mover. I found a mover. He said, I'll pay for the moving. So it's wonderful to have that chapel here. One of the problems with historic homes is that they try to pay the bills having tours every other Tuesday. It doesn't work. So we have private events, and most of those private events are weddings. When weddings are here, a lot of people say to me, oh, don't you hate it that there's weddings there and so many people, and it's so hard on the mansion because so many people are coming in and out. And I say, oh no, I love that. Think of how the thousands of people who have been changed here, watching a wedding in this gorgeous venue. On any given weekend, we'll have 200 or 300 people here enjoying this place, learning about it, appreciating Dorfeld's innovative spirit, and maybe taking some of that spirit on with them in their own lives. I think most people are drawn to beauty. So if it had been a beautiful home, most people are drawn to that. I think that I was drawn to its dilapidated state. And I think because I knew what it was to be in a dilapidated state, I knew that with love and with passion and with hard work, it could be beautiful again. So that this could stand as a metaphor for what can happen in your life. It doesn't have to be boarded up. We can change it. We can take that down. We can open up the windows. We can repair the doors. It can be made new again. Can you hear me all right? All right, those in the front row, you know you're right on the dance floor, so I'm gonna be coming out asking you to dance later, so. I came here and I wanted to create community, and look what I did.
Yeah, look at this. Look at that.
I see all of these people, and they're picnicking, and they're sitting in the sun, and they're gonna listen to great music, and they're having some good food, and they're just really connecting as individuals, one with another, but also as a community. It's what I dreamed of. I dreamed that this could happen, and it happened. And that's gratifying, humbling, fills me with joy. It's hard to explain, but you think back to a moment like, this is all because I said yes. Something in my soul said, do this, and I answered my soul with yes. I restore this place. People see that, they restore something. And that act of restoration restores. And more people are restored, and then that's restored community. The satisfaction of seeing something that everyone wrote off as worthless. The satisfaction of seeing that thing that was worthless become something useful and beautiful. I don't know of a greater joy than that. I'm the eternal optimist, and so whenever I see a place or a person in shambles, I never think they're beyond restoration. Restoration's always possible. And with love, probable. What began as just a restoration of a house turned into a restoration of a person, of a life. My name is Patty Meyer, and I took on a restoration project when I was young and foolish. And somewhere along the way, I learned a lot.